I'm Danielle, your host of the Abridged to Motherhood podcast, the place where moms like you learn to thrive, not just survive through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. I'm a birth and postpartum doula and a mom of two who's been where you are. My first pregnancy was filled with so much excitement, but it was also marked by stress, anxiety, and fear of the unknown. I thought I had everything mapped out, but when postpartum hit, I realized how unprepared I was for the physical, emotional, and mental toll of motherhood. It was overwhelming, lonely, and nothing like I imagined. When I found out I was pregnant again, I knew I needed to approach things differently. I made it my mission to not only prepare for postpartum, but to prioritize myself in the process. That shift changed everything. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Whether you're navigating your first pregnancy, feeling buried under endless advice, or struggling to figure out what you actually need for postpartum, this podcast is your safe space. You'll find practical tips, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you feel informed, supported, and empowered through every stage of motherhood. If you're ready to feel confident, prepared, and truly supported in your motherhood journey, stick around. This is for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the Abridged to Motherhood podcast. Today I have Maya Bailey with me. She is a licensed mental health counselor and the founder of From Rain to Rainbow Counseling and Consulting. Her work is deeply personal, rooted in her own journey through mental health challenges, especially during her first experience with motherhood. Becoming a parent changed everything. It cracked her open in ways she never expected and showed her just how hard it can be to hold on to your identity while carrying the weight of new roles, responsibilities, and expectations. Can't we all relate to that? It's from that place of vulnerability and resilience that she's built her practice, a space where parents don't have to pretend to have it all together, where your story is honored, your struggles are seen, and your healing matters. Her mission is to help end the exhausting cycle of comparison and offer instead a gentle landing place, a community grounded in peace, compassion, and self-kindness. As a therapist, she strives to be the person she once needed when she felt overwhelmed and unseen. Someone who walks beside you through the beautiful, messy, heartbreaking, and joyful parts of life, and maybe, just maybe, sprinkles a little glitter along the way to help the brightest moments shine even more. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Maya. Can't wait to talk all things working motherhood with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. It has been definitely a journey. I'm so glad that just that we're connecting and I'm able to kind of on my journey of like figuring out how to mom and be a professional at the same time, like be able to share that with others. And it led us to connecting too, which I think is great. That's how I
Mhm.
found your podcast, and I'm just happy to be here.
Let's talk about your entry into motherhood. What were your expectations going in? Did you think you were going to go back to work right away, or what was your plan in the beginning?
Yeah, so initially I was kind of on the fence of what I wanted things to look like. I definitely wanted to go ahead and start private practice, going from I was working at a university and there wasn't a lot of flexibility, and really my pregnancy, I already like struggled with some mood disorders growing up and throughout my whole lifetime, but pregnancy was a whole different level of that. I had prenatal depression, which was really something I never really heard about before, of that was felt really different, I guess, with all the hormones and just kind of mixing with some things I already kind of struggled with. It was like at first all my mental health things, like I'm a therapist, so I had all the plans together and like go to therapy, all that kind of stuff, and felt like things were well balanced. But then I got pregnant, and through the first trimester especially, and the third trimester, second trimester had that little, sometimes we have that little pick me up, but I was just, my mood was just shot. And I was like, I can't feel like this while I'm raising children. I would need to
Hmm.
figure out what needs to change, like control the controllables. Right. And so I was like, I'm going to start a virtual private practice after I give birth and dive into that. And so I started the works of creating, doing all the business stuff and behind the scenes and getting panel for insurance, all that stuff, so that I had basically the flexibility to be as present as I could be for my little one, but also can make a living because I needed to do that too, right?
Yeah.
So, and I remember when I was younger, my mom was just always so stressed out all the time and overwhelmed. And well, I mean, obviously we have to work, and she had a job that she didn't like. And so
Mm.
I saw that growing up, and I just wanted to model doing something that brought me joy. So I wanted to kind of see what that would look like. And that's when I went from working for someone else and started working for myself, which I learned very quickly that that is easier said than done for sure, especially someone who tends to overfunction and tends to not be very kind to herself a lot of times. Like it became, I would say yes to everything, and it was just a lot. But kind of going back to your question, just entering motherhood, I wanted to be present both in my job and at home. And so I was really trying to be really hard on myself about being realistic about like how can I make this happen?
Your story is similar to so many moms I know, right? We walk into motherhood and we want to continue working. Most of us have careers that we have a passion in. That's why we're in them. And as people are waiting longer to have children too, I'm noticing,
Mhm.
right? We don't want to give up our careers that we've worked so hard for, but that's what led me to doing what I'm doing now because I went back to teaching after my first for a couple years and I felt like I had nothing left to give at the end of the day. I had
Mhm.
given so much to my job and my students that there was little left for my family. And
Mm.
just wanting to find something not only that I felt passionate about, which led me to doula work, but also, like you said, that flexibility of schedule. And I relate to that too. My mom enjoys her job, but she worked a lot, growing up, and she has a job where she is somewhat on call, so she can get phone calls in the middle of the night and have to deal with
Mhm.
issues that arise. But my stepdad owned his own construction company, so he was the one with the flexibility. And I
Mhm.
always wanted that for at least one of us, my husband or
Mhm.
I, in our marriage, because like who's gonna go pick up the kids in the middle of the day if they get sick? We were both
Yeah.
teachers, and then it was a battle of like, well, who's gonna take off? Who has more time off? And I had used up basically all my sick time with maternity
Mhm.
leave, and because that's how it works with teaching, they take it all away from you, your sick time. And I was like, well, then he has to, and then oh, I have to, and then who's gonna make the sub plans and this and that.
Mhm.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's such a difficult decision for so many people of like, how am I gonna walk into motherhood and figure this out. But I also have a lot of clients that they feel stuck, in their jobs, and even though they might like it, they might not have that flexibility. And I'm curious what you would say to them as through your own experience and then as a therapist too. Like, how do you work through that in motherhood?
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of times that came with like figuring out like what's my definition of success. I felt like I had nothing left to give to my husband at the end of the day, and like I wouldn't want to talk, I wouldn't want to do anything. Of course, because at the beginning of my career, I worked inpatient and did all of these really, really high stress, really, really emotionally taxing jobs, and so. And honestly, it was really rewarding. But again, like, what did the rest of my life look like? And also, I think the biggest part that was helpful for me is not being in a rush. Because like once you figure out, like for me, success is kind of having more balance. Not maybe I'm not going to be the richest person in the world, but like in money, but like in being able to be present and being able to feel grateful, feel centered, feel like kind of that negative voice in my head being a lot quieter. That is what success feels like for me. And so that takes really being aligned with my values. And so being patient with like what that could look like, even if is a transition into whatever that career looks like. And even if that is going back to school and starting over, that's kind of what I would recommend. Knowing that when I went to grad school and became a therapist initially, there were so many people in my cohort that they were on their second or third career even. And so it's possible. It's just, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to look like perfect the way that we want things to look. But in 3 years, like think about like if you're going back to school, imagine if your life is completely different and is exactly the way you want it to be. Is that going to be worth the short-term discomfort? And I guess that's the biggest thing is getting over the instant gratification piece because I think that I struggle with that a lot. I just, especially like with going through so much like throughout my childhood and everything, and like kind of the like in my bio, that's kind of what led me to want to be help others. It's just feeling so sad, so miserable for so long, and so sometimes kind of shy away from emotional discomfort, but a lot of times that's what really frees us if we allow ourselves to get into that vulnerability and get into that discomfort and listen to what those emotions are telling us. Like if you're feeling stuck, then it could just take a tiny shift. Maybe you don't have to completely change everything, but go on Indeed and see if there's a way to transfer your skills to something that is more flexible or something that's virtual or some nowadays there's so many options, but it first takes listening to the discomfort and the feeling stuck and reaching out to talk to someone you trust. That's why therapy is really amazing because you can talk all of the about all the options without feeling judgment or feeling fear. I talked to my mom or even my husband about like some of the career changes I wanted to make initially. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, but how are you going to pay the bills? How are you going to do this?" It's the stress, like of being realistic, which is important, but also sometimes talking to people in your real life, it doesn't allow you to dream as much as you really need to be able to take the leap to do something that's really important for you and your kids and your whole family because they don't see the vision, but there's this little voice inside of you that really knows what you need. And so we need to figure out how to listen to that by getting rid of all the noise and finding a safe space where we can talk through all of the options.
I really like what you said about therapy being that non-judgmental space because even though my family has been very supportive of me
Hmm.
quitting my teaching job and pursuing becoming a doula and then now podcasting and all these different things that I've done and tried, it is scary. And there have been moments that my husband and I have had those hard conversations like, okay, can we keep going? Can we push through right now while the business is growing? Or maybe
Hmm.
you take a step down in your career. I know mothers who have done that. It's like they work full
Hmm.
time and then they go to part time because they want
Hmm.
to be home more and that initial shock of the finances here are different. That can be scary and challenging and like you said, but working through that discomfort if it's really what you want for your family
Hmm.
and finding out how to make that work. But I know when I first went back to work as a teacher, my daughter was born over winter break. It just so happened that way. She came early, and I wanted to take 12 weeks because that was very important to me to have that time with her. My mom stayed home with me all the way until I was in preschool, and then she was kind of working part time. And I was like, I really loved that experience. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to get as much time with her as I can. I ended up struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety. I share a lot about that on this podcast. And going back to work honestly was like a saving grace for me at that time because
Mhm.
I needed structure back in my life as part of like
Yeah.
my healing process of like a reason
Hmm.
to get up and get dressed and go somewhere in the morning and have that rhythm again. But I struggled. First, I struggled because I felt guilty for leaving her. And then I struggled because at the end of the day, I was like, well, I really liked just being at my job. So now I feel bad that I felt good
Hmm.
about being at my job and not with
Yeah.
her.
Hmm.
And I want to know your thoughts on that of like speaking to that mom that's like getting ready to drop the baby off for the first time and how do we work through those emotions as we transition back to work?
Yeah, the mom guilt is real. It just feels like you can't win. Like if you're like going back to work and you're providing for your family like that, it feels like, you're a bad mom for that. But if you're staying home and you're not working, then you're a bad mom for that. Like everything is laced with so much shaming, just because I don't even know where we get that from, but like there's just this imaginary view of like all of these boxes that we have to tick to be the perfect mom. And it is grounded in so many unrealistic expectations. And I know for me, the biggest thing that has helped me with all of that, I think in every category of life, has been self-compassion. It's the most powerful thing that kind of walks with me through all of my struggles. Kristen Neff, who is amazing, she's a psychologist who researches self-compassion and talks about how much it helps with resiliency. And the three components are mindfulness and common humanity and self-kindness. So that takes with being present with every single emotion objectively first, which is the hardest part because I think that kind of going back with everything, being present with your discomfort or with my discomfort, I know when I was postpartum, when I was going back to work, when I was pregnant, even, and not wanting to be pregnant, not like wanting the baby, but not wanting to be pregnant at all, and hating
Hmm.
literally the whole process, and people saying like, "Oh my gosh," like all these like this almost toxic positivity, almost like it would kind of make me feel like shame for feeling all my feelings. Being able to practice sitting with, I love this baby that I'm about to have, but I really hate this process and wish it were over, and sometimes wish that I weren't pregnant at all, or like being grateful, like you said, of like when my in-laws come and take the kids so I can work, being kind of happy for the silence sometimes and saying like, oh, that makes me feel shame because like, aren't I supposed to want to be with my kids all the time? That's what I'm supposed to be, or like all the shoulds, being present with even the most uncomfortable or even thoughts or emotions that you have like disgust or like hatred for, like being able to be present with those, knowing that your thoughts and your emotions don't define you. That is what mindfulness is all about, is just being present with it and knowing that it's just like a ship passing in the night. It's just there. And then that kind of goes with the common humanity piece of, if we're all struggling with this, it must be okay. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to have feelings that are not the same as everyone else. Or it's okay to know that there's more that unites you with like the shame, the mom guilt. It's par for the course to feel all of those things rather than remember feeling like you're an outsider. Or I would kind of would feel all the time, especially like throughout early motherhood, with the first kid, felt like everything I was doing was wrong, and everyone else had this rule book that I didn't have, that I needed to follow to be successful at this. But in reality, no one has a rule book. And so we're all just going at this blind pretty much. So being able to be okay with that and be okay with knowing that like we're all just figuring it out. And it's kind of cheesy, but I like to kind of, when I'm really in my self-compassion mode, imagine like all the other moms that are maybe struggling with me, or like going to your mom or going to their jobs, or just feeling lonely, feeling that guilt, and like all of us hugging each other and just saying like, hey, we're here together. That's just part of that connectedness that can take away that isolation that happens when we feel those uncomfortable feelings. And then being able to just be nice to yourself, just saying like, hey, it's okay to feel this guilt. Having those emotions of feeling heaviness or feeling guilt, or it's evidence that you are a good mom, because you're just thinking about how to be your best. But being present with it and saying like, these thoughts and feelings are part of your emotions, kind of telling you what you value, is kind of the biggest help, or at least for me, it kind of helps me to remember that, oh, this is uncomfortable, but it does say that I care. That was a lot, but it kind of sums it up to those three moments of like being present with that emotional discomfort, remembering that that emotional discomfort is what unites you with every other mom across the globe, everywhere, like across cultures, is like feeling like you have the hardest job in the world, which being a mom is the hardest job in the world,
Hmm.
and kind of put that on top of working to provide too. It's okay to feel all the feelings, and then being able to look at yourself with the same compassion and love that you would want your kids to feel, because I know for me, a lot of times the biggest thing I do is beat myself up a lot, but like I don't want to model that anymore. I think that's a big thing, especially when I have my daughter. I'm trying to be mindful of, how can I talk to myself the way that would want her to talk to herself? Because if I
Hmm.
if I don't do that, then how is she going to do that? Like I tell that to my clients all the time, but when I had my daughter, it really pushed me to start doing it, because like, how can I expect her to do that if I'm not even trying, if I don't even think it's possible? So
Hmm.
that self-kindness, that self-compassion, that openness to all of the feelings, that is the biggest transformative part of kind of kicking that mom guilt for me. Because I feel like a lot of people say, oh, well, just take care of yourself. But for me, self-care, it feels like a laundry list of other things I have to do. But self-compassion is a change in perspective that stays with you through everything that you do.
I love that so much because, and I talk about that on this podcast too, that self-care doesn't have to be taking these luxurious bubble baths and going to get a
Hmm.
massage. Like taking those 5 minutes of mindfulness or to journal or to say those kind words to yourself, that is self-care. Making sure that you eat nutritious meals and drink enough water, that is self-care too.
Yeah.
Like as you were talking, I love what you were saying about, across cultures that we all feel this mom guilt because listen, I have been a full-time working mom. I have worked part-time and I have been a stay-at-home mom. I've done all three. And I get so annoyed on social media when we're pitting moms against each other because, listen, I've done them all and they're all hard in different ways. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
there's not one that's easier than the other or harder than the other. They're all hard in different ways. And my hard is different than your hard.
Mhm.
Some people would say, to me, working is so much harder, or to me, staying home is so much harder. And it's knowing yourself, I think, and
Mhm.
what works best for you and your family
Mhm.
and your family's needs. And right, there are times that financially you have to be doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
whichever one that is. But I want to talk more about that conflict that seems to be happening amongst moms because we gotta get rid of that. We just
Mhm.
have to. I don't know. What are your thoughts surrounding all of that working,
Yeah.
not working culture?
Yes, definitely. Like I actually, because I don't know if I mentioned it, but I also kind of started a podcast called Girl Boss Graveyard, and the most recent episode, I talked a little bit about jealousy and comparison. And at least for me personally, I think that pitting against each other, I have been guilty of that in other ways for sure as I've come up and, feeling like that competition I feel like between women especially, but just in our society. And I've noticed that if I ever start to kind of tear someone down or start to highlight other people's flaws, it's usually to try to make myself to fill a void inside myself of like to distract from emotional vulnerability that needs to be addressed. Right.
Mm,
So I can't speak to the stay-at-home mom kind of part of it, but I know as a working mom, I really haven't had these thoughts, but I can imagine that some moms may feel like, oh, well, look at them. They are working. So, and maybe it could bring out some vulnerability of like, I am I fulfilled? Like just a question, right? And of course they are because they're doing like the most difficult job and like you don't get to clock out of that job and you get to have
mm-mm,
all these beautiful moments with your littles. And sometimes that question is so scary that instead of being able to say, oh, that's just a feeling, kind of like that self-compassion that we talked about, we get into like pointing the finger. As Brene Brown says, blame is a discharge of pain. So like when we're pointing
mm,
the finger at other people, it is always about some pain within. And I know for me as a working mom, I said I don't really have those thoughts, but I feel like if I had thoughts of like, oh, the stay-at-home mom, blah, 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 it would be for me about like, I really miss my kids. Why can't I stay home with my kids? And then
mm,
again, blame, they're the problem. Look at this person. Like they should be doing this, they should be doing that. And all that nasty comparison and jealousy and competition. I feel like it's just the instant gratification to kind of like almost a coping skill to self-soothe that emotional discomfort of not being able to or feeling like you have the freedom to do the work to understand what is this emotional discomfort? What does it look like? Because really we're all built with the little compass that tells us, like points us towards things that we need and away things from things that like we don't need. And if you don't even feel like you have the freedom to look at that compass, then you're going to start looking outwards to try to get some kind of quick fix, right? To
mhm,
get rid of that emotional discomfort. I'm kind of speaking to more so like high school me, where I felt like I had to tear other girls down, just like, oh my gosh, she's this, she's that, kind of picking out people's appearance or whatever it looks like when really I was just really insecure and didn't know myself and didn't have like identity and really society celebrates that, right? Like gossiping and talking
mhm,
about each other. And so how else are we supposed to know how to connect instead of compete when that's the norm? I think that's where it comes from for sure, that society kind of pits people against each other because especially women, because I think that the patriarchy or whatever knows that if women together are so powerful and can
mhm,
to accomplish so much that like it works better for the system to stay the way it is for us to not remember that we're a team and we're all in this together. Something I'm really grateful for in my community, we have this moms club and it's kind of a mix of working moms and stay-at-home moms and we work together. Like some of the stay-at-home moms, they help with some of the working stuff and like we do like little programs where people come and talk about what they do and stuff like that for the kids
mm,
and for each other
mhm.
and kind of share gifts. And so that's the kind of community I want to live in. And I hope that we're able to move towards. But really competition, jealousy, all those things, they come from, for me, it comes from like insecurity, comes from lack of fear, vulnerability, and comes from not knowing how to know that we can share. There's a
Mm,
scarcity of
hmm.
success, of happiness, of beauty, of like whatever it is. And so sometimes it feels like we have to take it from other people in order to have it for ourselves, even though in reality, there's enough success, there's enough beauty, there's enough happiness around for everyone if we're able to remember that we can share. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to end with you talking about how we can feel secure in whatever decision we're making in our work,
Mhm.
whether that is working from home, part-time, remote work, working outside of the home, being a stay-at-home mom, because that is work, that is labor. How
Mhm.
do we feel secure in those decisions that we have made for our family so we don't feel the need to do that comparison game?
It's a daily practice of making sure that your life is aligned with your values. A lot of times I can catch myself like looking at the Instagram feeds and all these other people and saying like, "Oh, well, I wish my life looked like that." But do I really if I take a step back? Even though it looks pretty on the outside, is that I know deep down that I've made choices to match my life to what my real definition of success is. And honestly, if we are all growing and changing, so if that ever changes, it's okay to shift, but don't let those short term, I guess, like comparing someone's outsides to your insides affect
Mm.
what is really going on. Be willing to sit with your discomfort and listen to the inner wisdom that comes from feeling anxiety, feeling stress, feeling sad, feeling lonely, because they really are guides to feeling whole if you listen to them. Like feeling sad drives us to connection. So if you are a stay-at-home mom and you might be feeling lonely because you're disconnected, why not call someone on the phone, like FaceTime someone or like whatever that looks like and try to find ways to connect, right? If for me, like working, a lot of times I feel disconnected from my kids. So I find just having looking through my pictures sometimes in between sessions or stealing little extra times of snuggles before bedtime, just really trying to listen to the discomfort and recognizing that a lot of times when it comes to, for me, when I'm craving something and kind of feeling that, like, I really wish someone would do this for me, it's sometimes something I can do for myself if I really think about, if I'm creative about what that looks like. I think it kind of boils back down to that openness to all of the emotional discomfort so that you feel empowered by it rather than discouraged by it. Every single role that we have as women, sometimes it pits us against ourselves against each other, right? Like it can feel like you're being torn apart. And so I think being able to find acceptance for the absurdity, I guess, of like all of the expectations and being able to dictate new normals for yourself, knowing that other people may turn their back against it, other people may think that you're doing this or doing that, like you are going to get criticism, but a lot of times, especially like in your family, if that isn't something that they're used to, I like to kind of say to myself, you're not crazy, you're just first, right? Other people may think everything that you're doing doesn't make sense, but it may just be because you're setting an example, you're breaking a cycle, you are forging a new path that is centered around wellness, and other people can't see that as something you can feel. And so you have to check in with yourself, be mindful, be present with the discomfort so you know when things are going well. It's kind of hard to stay in tune with yourself if you're kind of shutting yourself off to your feelings, to your experience. Yeah. I know I spent years and years being kind of numb to everything because it was too painful to feel all the feelings. But once I started letting that in, it was messier, but it was also so much more clear.
Definitely, I relate to that 100%. When you let those
Mhm.
feelings in, it is messy at first, but so much clarity does come
Mhm.
from that and tuning into what they're trying to tell you. Well, I just really appreciate you sharing all of this wisdom because this is a topic that, especially being a postpartum doula, I get a lot of questions about after working with my moms because typically I'm working with them while they're on maternity leave, and then it's like, oh,
Mhm.
what is this? what is this transition going to look like? We have lots of conversations surrounding going back to work and how they're feeling about it. And
Mhm.
so I think this is going to be so helpful for so many women. And I'd love it if you would just share with everyone who's listening how they can connect with you further.
Yeah, so I am a mental health counselor and I've got my like therapy Instagram, which is Maya underscore from rain to rainbow, just for tips and tricks of how to mom, but also like how to support you mentally while you do the momming journey. But also I have my podcast, Girl Boss Graveyard, and that is at Girl Boss Graveyard on Instagram. Like you said, Danielle, it can be really hard to navigate those first few months or just kind of navigate the transition back into work. So I do also offer some coaching if anyone is interested in like how to navigate that transition, can kind of pick up right where you leave off of like kind of that warm handoff, right? So if you're interested, you can email me at girlbossgraveyard@gmail.com.
Thank you so much again, Maya, for your time. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Abridged to Motherhood podcast. I'm so glad you were here today. If you loved this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Share it with a friend or snap a screenshot and tag me on social media. If you decide to leave me a review, go to abridgedomotherhood.com/review. That link is also in the show notes so that I can send you a little gift in the mail. Your support helps other moms to find the podcast, and it truly means the world to me. Remember, your motherhood journey deserves your care and attention. Until next time, keep showing up for yourself, mama, and don't worry, I'm here to help every step of the way. See you soon.